Okay, so there are approximately 200 of you joining us for this presentation tonight. One of the most exciting things that I've seen since taking this job is just how engaged and how excited the pro-life people of Illinois are. And because of that, I have no doubt that we can and we will win Illinois back for life. So all of you know, this has been a really hard week. It started with the death of pro-life hero, Joe Scheidler, and then of course went on with the inauguration of Joe Biden. Seeing you all here tonight, as I said, proves that we are going to win. And I have no doubt that by standing together and working together, we can turn the tide in Illinois. Things might look bleak right now, but working together, we will make a difference. So as we get started, just a few housekeeping details. We recommend that all of you have your Zoom settings on speaker view. If you go to the upper right hand of your screen, you'll be able to see where you can do that. That'll give you the best way to ensure you have good reception and see everything that we're doing tonight. Just so you know what's going to happen tonight, we're going to share information with you for about an hour, and then we will take questions. If you'd like to ask a question, just please type it into the chat box. You can get to the chat box at the bottom of your screen. Just click on that, type in your question, and then at the end of tonight, we'll try to get as many of your questions in as possible. As soon as we have a better handle on what specific bills have been introduced, what's going to be happening, we will be having future webinars so you know even more about what's going on, more about what you can do, et cetera, et cetera. We also are going to be sharing a link to a document that has more information about all of the bills that we're discussing tonight, so keep an eye out for that as well. So now I have the pleasure of introducing tonight's panel. We're really, really excited to have Jeannie Ives with us. She represented the 42nd District in the Illinois General Assembly from 2013 to 2019, and most recently challenged Democrat Sean Casten to represent Illinois' 6th Congressional District, the same district that was once represented by Congressman Henry Hyde, huge pro-life hero. Sadly, Jeannie didn't win this race, but any of you who know Jeannie know that she is not going anywhere. She is taking the lead with a new organization called Breakthrough Ideas that will be taking the Chicago suburbs back from the left. Jeannie is also a member of the Illinois Right to Life Action Board and is a champion for the unborn and other vulnerable populations. We also have with us Ralph Rivera, who is the legislative chairman of Illinois Right to Life Action and has lobbied on behalf of life and traditional values for over 30 years. He is a fixture in Springfield, and as you'll see tonight, he is a wealth of information, and he's been a tremendous help to me as I get started in this position. Molly Malone is our assistant legislative chairman. She joined us in 2018 and is a tireless advocate for the unborn. You will see that she is one of those young people that gives us all hope for the future. Finally, we have Dr. Steve Jacobs. He will be moderating tonight's discussion. Steve has both a JD and a PhD and is an invaluable resource to us at Illinois Right to Life. He provides research, he provides educational leadership, and you will be seeing a lot more of him in the weeks and months to come. Now I will turn it over to Dr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Amy. And thank you all for being with us here tonight. And we have Ralph. So he is the pro-life movement's leader in Springfield. And Ralph, I was wondering if you could start off by telling us a bit more about the current state of anti-life legislation in the state assembly.
All right, thank you, Steve. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Before I do that, let me just quickly state that we're starting a brand new General Assembly. And it's the 102nd General Assembly. They had the inauguration last Wednesday or 2 Wednesdays ago, and they're just starting out. In fact, this week, neither the House or Senate are in. Next week, neither the House or Senate are in. And the week after, just the House is in. So they're getting a very slow start. And bills that you've heard about just recently, that's from the last General Assembly, the last 2-year General Assembly. And any bills that have not passed to the governor or have not been signed, those bills are dead. So what we're going to see in the coming weeks are brand new bills. As a matter of fact, only 217 House bills have been introduced in the Illinois House. No Senate bills yet that we see. So this is a very slow start. And we see up to 5,000 bills introduced during a legislative year. So a long way to go. So we're going to talk, Molly and I, about some of the anti-life bills and some of the challenges that we're seeing. And I'll begin. Let's begin with a current, very difficult bill. It's an Illinois State Board of Education proposed rule. And it's it sets new teaching standards for culturally responsive teaching and leading standards for public school educators. This is a terrible bill because it forces pro-life teachers to do something against their will. And I'm going to go into that in more detail. But I first want to tell the people who are watching, this is not legislation. It's a different kind of thing. It's a proposed rule. So agencies of the state government can propose rules, and they do over the years and over time. And the Illinois State Board of Education did so back in September. There's a process involved, and this proposed rule will become law if not stopped. It will be as law, become a permanent rule within 6 months of September 11th when it was introduced. There is a means for the General Assembly to stop it. And that is the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. It's a unique committee of the General Assembly. It's actually, it has 12 members and an equal number of state senators and state representatives and an equal number of Democrats and Republicans. So these 12, their job is to look at proposed rules and see if those rules are making law, because only the General Assembly can make law with the governor. No agency can do that. So they look at these rules. If they believe that they are making law, then they have the authority, if they can have 8 out of the 12, at least 8 out of the 12, vote for a motion to suspend that proposed rule, then it's done. So let me go on now to the proposed rule, but you get the dynamic here. This is not legislation, but it's like legislation, and it's treated a different way. So going to this proposed rule, it would, in effect, create new teaching standards. So for a public school teacher in Illinois to get a license to teach or a certification, they would have to meet these new standards. And the standards essentially, and it goes on page after page, say that these teachers are required to embrace, affirm, encourage inclusive viewpoints. Now, the word inclusive was just substituted recently by the state board. The original word was progressive viewpoints. And as you, Molly and I know at the Capitol, progressive legislators are vehemently pro-abortion. They're vehemently against religious liberties. And so this is of great concern. In one sense, there are a number of things that these teachers have to meet. But for example, take the word inclusive. What does that mean? There's no definition. So you have a vague thing that teachers have to meet in order to keep their teacher's license. And that's of great concern. Additionally, there's another part where it says leveraging student advocacy. And it says you must emphasize and connect with students about their identities, advocacies, and self-interest. The state board had changed the wording of activism to advocacy, but it's really the same thing. In other words, they want to get involved in student activism, and as we talked about, affirming and encouraging inclusive viewpoints. These are viewpoints of the students. So the question is, if a student says, I'm pro-choice, Does the teacher have to affirm, embrace, and encourage that? And if she doesn't, according to this new standards, she could lose her license. And this is the difficulty here. So we have worked with Thomas More Society, as a number of you know, is the public interest law firm which handles abortion or pro-life cases. And they gave us legal counsel. We sent a comment letter to the State Board of Education, in effect saying that this is fraught with legal problems. So the vagueness in a lot of these words, such as inclusive and advocacy, it could force teachers, they don't know what the parameters are. In other words, how are they to work with students and meet those needs when they don't know what the standards are for that, because there's no definition for that. Additionally, if you're forced to embrace, affirm, and encourage, you're forced to give, in effect, compelled speech. That's unconstitutional. And there are other problems with this that go on. So we have been working first with the state board. We have not got responses from them, but we gave our comments and said, this is how you can correct this. We are working now with the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules that I spoke to you about. That's JCAR, we call that JCAR. And we have asked those members, given the material we've given them, to vote to suspend that rule so that it won't become permanent or won't go into a permanent rule. And JCAR is meeting February 16th. And this proposed rule is on the agenda, but it's, again, a very dangerous rule. A good article that just came out this week by the National Review cites the title of this is Ultra Woke Illinois Mandates Are Top Threat to U.S. Education. They cite within their very fine article the battle we're dealing with the proposed rule. And it really shows that Illinois is on a pathway to indoctrinate our students, to get into the progressive viewpoints. And you'd say, well, why would they do this with the teachers? Because they want to remove conservative religious teachers out of the public school system so that a progressive liberal dialogue can only be done. There's no other options because they're removing our kind of teachers. So this is very dangerous. And we are prepared, if we cannot stop it in JCAR, to look toward a lawsuit.
Ralph, if you wouldn't mind, so I love that you brought up that article. I was actually going to ask about that, especially with this compelled speech issue. So when you've talked to Thomas More Society, is that something that you're talking about, the possibility of Illinois pro-life teachers suing on behalf of a breach of their own constitutional rights by being forced to give certain types of speech?
Yes, that's correct. We are looking at that. And again, the example is, if you have to embrace every student's idea, if a student says, I'm pro-choice, do you have to embrace that? No. You know, at the state capitol, Molly and I, we talk with pro-choice legislators all the time. But we can acknowledge that they're not pro-life, but we don't have to embrace and affirm. That would be against our religious belief. Teachers can acknowledge, yeah, Freddie says he's pro-choice. You don't have, that's acknowledging. You don't have to embrace, affirm. That goes against one's religious speech, and that's what we're very concerned about. Okay, so let me go to, unless you have something, Steve? Okay, so let me go to a couple of bills that were in the old General Assembly that Planned Parenthood specifically, it's a priority with them. We will see it in this new General Assembly. And these are bills that expand the sex education program. And in that, it does many things, but one of them is of concern dealing with pro-life. So what they are saying is that they want to expand programs for pre-K to 12th grade to promote abortion, promote sexual behavior and experimentation for students, and discriminate against the religious beliefs of many students, their parents, and their places of worship. For example, it talks of the 6th through 7th grade. 6th through 7th grade, 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 they shall get information about confidential local services as it relates to the healthcare issue, or as they would call it, or abortion. And they said without immediate parental notification or consent. They also say that these same students shall get information about local health services in which the student can get information about reproductive health. And then it also says that it has to be unbiased information and non-stigmatizing information about the options regarding pregnancy and abortion. So by saying unbiased, what they're saying is if the school district or the school or the teacher says, well, abortion is not a safe procedure, or it's dangerous, not good, it's wrong, that would be considered biased. So you can only say either positive things, or you can just, if you say this is how you can get an abortion, this is where you can go, this is who you can call, these are positive things. For them to say it's neutral is not the case. So there's a danger to getting students to hear only one side and not their side on a religious view.
So Ralph, if you wouldn't mind, in your conversations with people about this this rule, have any of your fears been assuaged in terms of them saying that, well, this would actually benefit pro-life people too? Because if a student says they're pro-life, the teacher would be required to support, encourage, and affirm that. Or in the case of sex ed, if there is to be unbiased information about their options, that they should be educated on the fact that having being pregnant, being with child, means that you have a human living inside of you, and that abortion is actually the cessation or the killing of that human life. So is there any indication that there's some amount of balance, or is it just really one-sided for them?
It is, and that's the reality. It's going to be, you're right. It would seem like if it has to be inclusive, it has to include us. But that's not the way it's going to do it, because when although they took out the word progressive, and that's because a couple of members of the State Board of Education just didn't like that name, so they put in inclusive. But that's what it is. And if you're progressive, you're not pro-life. And but you're right. The bills, for example, say you have to do medically accurate information. Will they take it that medically accurate would also demand students are instructed that human life begins at conception, and that the fetus in the womb is a human, and therefore abortion must be taught as the killing of a human life? That would be medically accurate. I can assure you they're not going to do that and they don't do it now. So it's a one-sided thing. But they play this game like we're trying to be inclusive. Unfortunately, inclusive today does not include Christian views. And so that's where we are today. And that's why these kinds of bills and of course the proposed rule have to be stopped. So for those particular categories right now, I can stop and let Molly go on with the other bills.
That sounds great, Ralph, and thank you for that explanation. I learned a lot. Now, Molly, so we've heard about some anti-life legislation from last year, and I was wondering if you could tell us more about these bills and whether we still have a need to be concerned about them for the upcoming year.
So like you said, there were several anti-life bills introduced, particularly in 2020. Even though we had a very short, truncated session, they still found time to introduce some of these. So I'll just go over a couple, or about 4 of them. Now, the bill numbers that I'm about to give you will no longer exist because they were from the 101st General Assembly, and as Ralph said, we're now in the 102nd. But just for clarity's sake, I'll give the bill numbers anyway. So first we have House Bill 5506, which was introduced by Representative Barbara Hernandez, and it's often referred to as the Reproductive Fact Act. And the FACT is supposed to stand for freedom, accountability, comprehensive care, and transparency. This bill is explicitly used to target crisis pregnancy centers. It would require that these pregnancy resource centers provide notice that the state of Illinois provides low or no cost abortions, and they would have to post where they can get those abortions, or they at least have to post a phone number for the social services department in that area. But also require that they post that they are not a licensed medical facility in the state of Illinois. And what's ironic about that, no Planned Parenthood in the state is licensed by the state of Illinois either. Should they be required, should this law be enacted and the crisis pregnancy centers fail to comply with it, they would be subject to a $500 fine for the first offense and a $1,000 fine for each subsequent offense. But there is good news about this bill, and that is that this bill was actually already passed and signed into law in California, which sounds bad, but it was actually struck down by the US Supreme Court in 2018 on the grounds that it violates the First Amendment. So we will be watching for this bill to be reintroduced, but even if it is, it can't go into effect due to it being struck down by the US Supreme Court. Next, we would have House Bill 5656. And what's important to understand about this bill first is going back to the so-called Reproductive Health Act. The Reproductive Health Act requires that all private insurance companies in the state provide abortion coverage if they also provide different types of pregnancy-related care. What this bill would do is require all health and accident coverage plans to cover abortion, even if they don't cover other pregnancy-related care. So no one is exempt from what the Reproductive Health Act did, should this become law. Now, this is kind of a smaller, I can't imagine that it's high on their priority list, and the representative who introduced it was not reelected this year. So we'll still be looking out for it for sure, but it's likely that it won't be reintroduced. But if it is, like I said, we are prepared for it. Then we'll jump to a couple of Senate bills. So Senate Bill 3524 makes changes to what is called a POST form. And POST stands for Practitioner's Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. And Ralph always makes sure that I know that this is quite the opposite of life-sustaining treatment. This isn't, what you've probably already gathered is this isn't exactly this is an anti-life bill, but it's not a pro-abortion bill. This has to do with people who could become incapacitated to make decisions for their own health care in the very near future. So when we first saw the POST form introduced into Illinois, it was negotiated that this form would have several safeguards on it, such as it used to be called a physician's order. What I should probably circle back around and just state is that this includes, what's on this form is orders from the practitioner, but it's via the patient's request of what they would like done in the case that they can't make their own medical decision. So whether they would like to be resuscitated, whether they would like food and water given to them, how long, this sort of thing. So that's what's on the form. And what we're worried about with this bill is that it actually removes the requirement for a witness to sign the bill, or sign the form, I'm sorry. And this is just one more safeguard that's removed. So generally, it doesn't have to be, but generally the witness who signs it is going to be a family member, a clergy member, a friend, someone who's looking out for the person's well-being and just ensures that they know exactly what they're signing. So we just really want to keep that safeguard for those people who are in a very vulnerable situation. And then finally, Senate Bill 3668 was introduced by Senator Staines, and it deals with immunizations. And you might be asking, what does immunizations have to do with the pro-life movement? But one thing that's important to note is that many vaccines in the United States are derived using aborted fetal tissue. And what this bill would do is remove the religious exemption for people who don't want to vaccinate their children or vaccinate themselves based on the knowledge that some of these vaccines have a connection to abortion. So it's important, for whether you agree or disagree, it's really important that we keep that religious exemption for those who do feel that it would bother their consciences if they did partake of that. So that's kind of a brief overview of what we saw last year. And I do think that, especially in this COVID-19 world that we're dealing with, we will see Senate Bill 3668, the immunization bill, reintroduced in the 102nd General Assembly.
Thank you for the rundown of those bills. Now, if you wouldn't mind, though, I'm sure a lot of people at home, it seems we have 110 people right now attending. I'm sure a lot of them are wondering, what are things that we can do as a community to stop some of this bad anti-life legislation from being passed, Molly?
Yeah, well, I think that they are all off to a great start by tuning into this webinar. And so that means that they're connected to Illinois Right to Life and Illinois Right to Life Action. So I would just encourage them to stay up to date with the what we're posting on Facebook, and making sure that they are up to date with all of the alerts that go out when there is bad legislation. I think that our organization does a pretty good job of keeping people up to date and telling them exactly what they need to do, whether that is calling their legislators, reaching out to their legislators through email, or even signing witness slips when it's necessary.
Great. Now, again, so we've pretty much talked about anti-life legislation which seeks to remove equal protection of our most vulnerable, really hurt women. Now, is there any legislation on the pro-life side that's either been introduced or passed recently in Illinois? Is there anything we should keep our eye on?
Yeah, so actually this is one of the most encouraging things to note. While we don't have a pro-life majority in Illinois right now, though the legislators that are pro-life are passionate about pro-life and they want to do something. So between 2019 and 2020, even though we had a truncated session in 2020, there were still many pro-life bills introduced. Probably between the 2 years, there were over 20 introduced. And while they didn't get a hearing, it's still encouraging to know that these legislators want to do something for the pro-life movement in Illinois. So there were several of them, and they were very diverse. One of them, now Senator Darren Bailey, introduced one that would require doctors to let the patients know if the immunizations they were getting were derived using aborted fetal tissue. Another one that we saw introduced was a heartbeat bill. So it would ban abortions after we know that there is a heartbeat. There was a 20-week abortion ban introduced. There was a partial birth abortion ban. And so there was a huge variety of pro-life bills, including actually an Ultrasound Opportunity Act, which would just allow women the opportunity to look at their ultrasound before they go through with the abortion. So it is encouraging to know that our pro-life legislators are passionate about what they're doing, and they're not going to be stopped by, bad numbers.
That's wonderful to hear, and make sure to keep on them in Springfield to keep introducing good legislation. One could say the victory is in the attempt, not necessarily just the win. So let's keep it going. Now I'm going to actually tag Ralph in again. So Ralph, I want to turn to the issue that I think Illinois Right to Life supporters have most inquired about over the last year: parental notification. Could you update us on that?
Yes, so the last session, again, the 101st General Assembly, In 2019, there was a Senate and a House bill that would repeal the Parental Notice of Abortion Act. So that bill or that law was passed in 1995. It was was enjoined for years. And finally, there was a battle in both federal court and before the Illinois Supreme Court. And then in 2013, we were able to bring this bill into effect. And since that time, because we can see the data of out-of-state minors coming, because we were surrounded by states, or we are surrounded by states who have either parental notice or parental consent in their laws. Minors were coming across the state into Illinois, but we can see the data over the years, and we saw that once this law went into effect, at least 1,000 unborn babies were saved each year, and therefore 1,000 minor girls were helped during that time. And this is one law on automatic pilot, if you will, saving 1,000 unborn babies and these minor girls year after year after year. That is why Planned Parenthood and the others want this bill stopped so badly. So it is in fact their priority, their first priority. They believe that they've said that if they defeat the parental notice law, that would make Illinois a 100% pro-choice state. Since they've got taxpayer funding, they have the terrible RHA bill. This is what they want. So our job is to rally our people, to go to the churches, to get to our churches, our pastors, our people, and let them contact their legislators. That's so important. I can't stress enough that when legislators get huge numbers of calls, emails, visits, et cetera. So a little harder to visit, but they could do Zoom. You know, this is the new thing we're doing, but that's so important. We know of legislators who have said they've actually said to the other side, you know, I got 60 calls or emails against the RHA, but I only got 2 saying vote for it. So that carries some weight, and that's very important. So the basic job of our people is to reach out to their legislator, even if they're not pro-life. You say, well, that person's not. We actually picked up a number of votes against the Reproductive Health Act last year from legislators who had never voted with us. So you just don't know. And I think for a number of legislators, they look at this and say, why shouldn't parents know that they can help their daughter through this, know about what she's going to do, and so forth. So this is something that I think we can win, but our people have to do what they have done in the past, and that's reach out to their legislators, both senator, House member, and get your churches involved. Churches can get involved in this, doesn't hurt their tax status at all. This is just a part of the civic thing of saying, you know, let your people know, let your legislators know what the people of your congregation or your parish want.
And I love that, Ralph. And in order to empower those watching this live stream as well as those who are watching the video after the fact, and I can actually open this up to the panel as well. What are some of the things that people should be talking about when they make these calls? So it was great that you offered that statistic. You know, how are they supposed to message about it in terms of, is it an issue of these are girls who are making a decision out of fear because they don't have the support of their parents? And if they knew that their parents would support them, that's the reason why there were fewer abortions amongst teenagers, that they found out that there was support for them. I just know that there's a lot of bad rhetoric on the other side where it's as if these girls are in some great risk if they are to tell their parents about their abortion or if their parents find out from the clinic. So I just wanted to open it up so everybody could be empowered to communicate this well to the people they're calling. And you could feel free to start, Ralph, and then if anybody.
All right, let me do that. I was waiting for the others, but yeah, I think that what we're seeing also is that, well, let me give you a statistic. 32% of teen mothers aged 15 to 17 are impregnated by men older than age 20. So you have men in their 20s, they're having sex with minors and getting away with it if you don't have parental notice, or you don't have some way to let somebody know. Under the current law that is parental notice, you have to notify a parent or a grandparent or a step-parent living in the house with the minor, or of course you have a legal guardian because the court has set that up. The United States Supreme Court required that the law say give a waiver of notice going through the courts. So that's what was set up there. So there are, but if you go to court, maybe that comes up. How did you get impregnated? By some 35-year-old man? This is an important thing to know, certainly by telling mom and dad. So these are things that are important. You have sexual predators, you have human traffickers, et cetera. This is a real situation that the Parental Notice of Abortion Act can help. And without it, there's no help. There's nobody to go to. This man brings the minor in, she gets the abortion, he can keep doing this.
I'm gonna just step in here, weigh in on that a little bit. As a former legislator, I will tell you that the most compelling thing to hear is a personal story about the situation that you're dealing with in the legislation. There's nothing more really better for the conversation than to understand it at the personal level. So statistics sometimes doesn't mean a darn thing to people, but if you fail to engage at all, trust me, they will think that, you know what, they're just either going to get away with the vote because nobody's paying attention, or that you really don't care about that issue. But again, walking in with a personal story, and I think it's really going to be great to have Illinois State Rep, brand new State Rep Chris Voss there, because part of his professional life is dealing with children who have been in sex trafficking situations. So hopefully he will bring a lot of stories up that will actually be very powerful in this debate about parental notice.
Wonderful. If there's nobody else from the panel that wanted to weigh in on that, we could actually move forward to Jeannie. That was very apropos. So Jeannie, since you're the special guest tonight, since your experience as an elected official and a representative of the pro-life movement in Illinois, that it's given you this unique insight into the legislative process as well as the fight from the other side, I was wondering what you can tell us about former Speaker Mike Madigan's replacement.
Well, and I noticed that somebody, actually, I think Chris Iverson put that into the chat box, wants to know what is this looking like with Madigan's replacement being Chris Welch. Well, first of all, I don't know that Ralph mentioned it, but Chris Welch was the sponsor of the repeal of the Parental Notification Act. So that does not bode well, really, for us having him be the sponsor of that just awful legislation. I found Chris Welch to be a very partisan person down in Springfield, one of the most partisan folks there. And he comes from the Black Caucus, however, which honestly, most of them tend to have a pro-life bent to them. So he's kind of going against his caucus with this bill on parental notification. I personally feel that he is going to be very busy just trying to figure out how to handle a budget. What are they going to do about the remap? How is he going to handle all the factions and who gets what particular committee and just running the whole speakership, running the House. That is a big task, and I'm not sure that he's up with it. And I think he's going to have his hands full. I also hope, I'm very hopeful, I don't know if it's true, but I'm hopeful that their appetite for pro-abortion bills has been quelled for a while. And I say this because the 2019 RHA Act obviously was a response to everything that you saw happening at the national level, from New York's progressive abortion bill to what was happening in Virginia. They want to get on the bandwagon with them. At the same time, you had a number of pro-life victories in Missouri and in Alabama and in Georgia and in other places where heartbeat bill after heartbeat bill was getting passed. And so Illinois had to come forward with something to be in that other category. And I think, I'm hoping that their appetite for this is quelled, but I'm not confident in that. because it's payback time, and they still won. And so, you know, this could lead one way or the other, but hopefully with Ralph and Molly down there reminding people of what's the most important thing that we should be talking about, which is not another repeal of a parental notification. Hopefully we can at least stop it, at least for another year or so.
And just quickly before we move on, Jeannie, Ralph or Molly, if you wanted to share any insights you have into Speaker Welch or any personal experiences you've had with him.
Yeah, I've dealt with him over time, but he was the House sponsor of the Repeal on Parental Notice of Abortion Act. As Speaker, he may not handle it himself, but someone else will. But he would certainly open the door for them, see that it gets on the floor of the House. It has the vote when they think they have the votes. So he will be doing all that to help it. But he'll be, as Jeannie says, he'll be too busy to handle many bills on his own. Right.
Thank you for that, Ralph. And Jeannie, so turning back to you as well as turning to the federal level, now that Joe Biden is President Biden, we're all probably pretty curious about what impact he will have on legal battles about abortion, and possibly even what effect he could have on the pro-life movement, given some of the scary rhetoric we've seen from other politicians on that side, and given the backlash from the last 4 years. So what do you predict in the coming months and years?
Well, I predict a 180-degree reversal of President Trump's policies and pro-life stances. And let's remember, you've all heard the phrase, elections have consequences. Now, how many of you know who said that phrase and when? Well, it was Barack Obama who said it in 2010 to then House Republican Whip Eric Cantor. Eric Cantor had given Obama a list of modest proposals on the Obamacare bill. And Obama basically said he would consider the GOP ideas, but told the assembled Republicans that elections have consequences and I won. So, I mean, that's where we're at. Elections have consequences. And you know, let's remember who we had before this with President Trump. 2 days prior to the inauguration, on January 18th, President Trump put out the Proclamation on National Sanctity of Human Life. And he wrote, "Every human life is a gift to the world, whether born or unborn, young or old, healthy or sick. Every person is made in the holy image of God. The Almighty Creator gives unique talents, beautiful dreams, and a great purpose to every person. On National Sanctity of Human Life Day, we celebrate the wonder of human existence and renew our resolve to build a culture of life where every person of every age is protected, valued, and cherished." You will never hear those words for the next 4 years from President Biden, ever. He went on to say, and I think this is really important, because think about how far President Trump took us to where we are now. He wrote in the proclamation, "Since my first day in office, I have taken historic action to protect innocent lives at home and abroad. I reinstituted this and strengthened President Ronald Reagan's Mexico City policy, issued a landmark pro-life rule to govern the use of Title X taxpayer funding, and took action to protect the conscious rights of doctors, nurses, and organizations like the Little Sisters of the Poor. My administration has protected the vital role of faith-based adoption. At the United Nations, I made clear that global bureaucrats have no business attacking the sovereignty of nations that protect innocent life. Just a few months ago, our nation also joined 32 other countries in signing the Geneva Consensus Declaration, which bolsters global efforts to provide better health care to women, protect all human life, and strengthen families." This is what you're going to see. It's not hard to understand. You will see 180-degree reversal on that. America has moved in polar opposite directions. Now, you know, just the morning of inauguration, of course, there you had President Biden, or soon to be President Biden, go to Catholic Mass and receive communion. Now, I personally, as a Catholic, I don't know how you could do that, understanding where he stands on life issues, because he's adamantly, just after then getting put into office, he signed on to 17 executive orders. The Wall Street Journal today had them listed, and one of the 17, one that he felt was prominent enough to sign on his first day. This is what Biden said. He reversed the Mexico City policy, which mandates that foreign non-governmental groups can't provide abortions if they get the U.S. funding. So instead, he said that he is happy to provide U.S. funding to non-governmental groups in foreign countries that provide for abortions. That is 100% reversal. So this is what we can expect, but I'm here to tell you it's going to even get worse than that. And now remember also, this is interesting because Biden has nowhere to go. The Democrats have leaned very further left, more progressive. But even in 2019, during the presidential primary election that the Democrats were having, in June, in a debate, Biden did say that he was going to continue to support the Hyde Amendment. But the backlash was so severe that within 2 days, he had to reverse that position and say that he is willing to take away the Hyde Amendment anymore. And he has congressional support to do just that. In 2019, there was something called the Each Woman Act. And the Each Woman Act basically gets rid of the Hyde Amendment. It had 22 co-sponsors in the Senate. It had 130 co-sponsors in the House. And what you should know is that Sean Casten, who is the Illinois 6th Congressional District Congressman, who sits in Henry Hyde's legacy seat, has said publicly that he wants to be the deciding vote to end the Hyde Amendment as he sits in Henry Hyde's legacy seat. So this is not this is not doing well. They have a slim margin in the House, but they do control the House. It's a 50-50 split in the Senate, but Kamala Harris, the VP, is now the deciding vote. They get rid of the filibuster. They can do anything they want and pass any amendment they want or get rid of anything. So the Hyde Amendment is truly in jeopardy. Something else pro-lifers should understand. As Trump spoke specifically about how these people are made in the image of God, you need to know that both Sean Casten and Senator Duckworth refused to identify that they have any religious affiliation whatsoever. Going on, Sean Casten is a member of what they call the Atheist Caucus or the Free Thought Caucus, but it gets worse than that. On top of that, a group of people that they call themselves the Secular Democrats of America wrote a 28-page demand letter to President-elect Joe Biden asking for things that they want. And it's basically a stripping of religion from public life. It's not, as the First Amendment says, that you have freedom of religion. You really want freedom from religion. Now, that's not, the First Amendment is freedom of religion, but I think it's important for you guys to get a hold of this thing. It's a 28-page document. You need to be informed. It's the best thing you can do. Thank you for tuning into this presentation. I'm going to just give you a couple passages so we can get right to questions, but you need to understand how critical this. I've already pushed this out to pastors and to other people. You need to take this document, print it off, you'll find it on, and show it to your pastor and say, every person in the pew needs to understand how radical these ideas are. First of all, it should be noted that in this document, they consider people that are members of the religious right, or people that they basically call them they actually say in the document that Christian national movement or the religious right. This movement, they say, is extraordinarily well-funded and well-organized, and the manifestation of its extreme and sectarian agenda is on constant display under the Trump and Pence administration. It basically says it's political ideology. They're telling you, if you're religious right, you are anti-democratic and anti-scientific, and that you provide cover for white supremacy. That is what they're saying, because they can connect the religious right and what we stand for, or what they call the religious right. We just call ourselves religious or Christian. But if they can connect us to racist or white supremacy, then they think they win the rules, the day. We cannot let them adopt language that is hateful and incorrect. So we all have to push back against this. But in this document, just to read a couple things, because I know that we are short on time, I want you to understand that one of the specific things that they write is, we urge your administration, talking about the Joe Biden administration, we urge your administration to disincentivize state funding for programs that are not evidence-based and which can cause harm by spreading misinformation, such as crisis pregnancy centers and abstinence-only education programs. These programs are an ineffective use of taxpayer dollars, and they cause demonstrable harm to vulnerable communities. They're writing this as a demand letter. They go so far as to say military commanders should not use language that appeals to God. Now, I served in the military. I don't know if people on the battlefield are going to cry for help. They're going to cry for help from God. And they are absolutely asking people, the commanders, not to use that, not to connect faith in God with patriotism. This document is the most obscene thing ever. It goes on and on. They're dangerous. They're a dangerous caucus. They want what they want. They've been working for a couple of years. And right here in Illinois, you have some of the biggest leaders cheerleading the end of the Hyde Amendment and radical abortion legislation. Radical abortion legislation. A couple closeout things here before I forget. I think what this portends is, one, more lawsuits. Hobby Lobby, Little Sisters of the Poor, other insurance companies, more lawsuits. It also, the problem here is that you can work really hard in the state of Illinois or in a pro-life state like South Dakota, Iowa, Missouri. But if these folks at the federal level get their meat hooks on legislation that the states cannot undo, you're going to see more lawsuits, or you're going to see really bad legislation coming up at the federal level. So elections have consequences. And I think that's all I wanted to cover right now. Thank you.
Wonderful. Great. Thanks, Jeannie. And Amy, if you'd like to bring us home.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you to everyone who was on our panel tonight. That was really, really great information. And we have several questions that we'll get to in a second, but I just want to reiterate what was just said. The way that we are going to turn the tide is by being engaged and by being involved. And I firmly believe that a majority of people in Illinois really don't know how extreme the RHA is. They don't know that their taxpayer dollars are going to pay for abortions here. They don't know just how extreme we are in this state. I actually am coming to Illinois from Wisconsin, where Wisconsin Right to Life and others have been very successful in just slashing the abortion rate there. And over again, since I've had this job, I keep thinking to myself, you're not in Wisconsin anymore. But the people of the state, as I said earlier, are so engaged and are so enthusiastic. And what we need to do is, as Jeannie mentioned, is work together to change our state. And you do that by being engaged. I encourage everybody to visit the Illinois Right to Life Action website so you can sign up to receive our emails and so forth. Follow us on social media. We have accounts on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, etc. Please follow us. That's a great way to hear what we're doing and what you can do. Also, I really encourage everybody to contact their legislators. In a previous life, I was a Senate aide in Wisconsin, and I can tell you that contacting your legislators really does work. Letters are great, phone calls are better. Meeting with them in person, or as the case is now over Zoom, is invaluable. It really, really does make a difference. So that personal contact, the phone calls, especially the meetings, are critically important.
Can I step in here and say one thing? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Can I step in here? When you're meeting with your legislator, I actually encourage you to tape the conversation. We did have one pro-abort legislator, and I think in part because when she was talking about, when they were talking about the abortion issue and stuff, she essentially said that the answer to that was to castrate men. And we had that. We had people in there who reported it. And, you know, articles were written on it. And I think that that's really part of the reason that she lost, because sometimes these legislators are so full of themselves, they say the most ridiculous stuff. So I'm all for taping them if you can. Thank you.
Good point. So let's jump into some questions right now. Somebody just posted this in the chat box, but we actually got several questions from people about how do I find out who my legislator is? How do I get in contact with them? Ralph or Jeannie, do you want to address that?
Sure. Let me, so you go to the ilga.gov website. That's the Illinois General Assembly website. On there, you will see in the Senate side, it say members, and on the House side, it says members. You click that, you can find, if you know your legislator, you can then get his district office, his Springfield office, phone numbers, et cetera. The Senate doesn't give their emails anymore, but the House still does. And so you can do that. I was on just recently, and I saw that there are a number of new legislators who have nothing. They have their picture, but no district office, no Springfield office. And actually, they probably don't, because, and even for those that are there, because there's a jockeying of position for offices, right, Jeannie? That at the beginning, who gets the biggest office by seniority? So you're not quite sure, even if someone was there for 10 years, they may want a bigger office, and therefore that number has changed. For new legislators, they're probably still looking for a district office that they can move to. So it's a little new now, but if you have the same legislator, you can get a lot of information there and you can contact them.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ralph. Another thing I think is important is to, and somebody mentioned this, is to thank our pro-life legislators and those who voted in favor for life. How do we find out who the pro-life legislators are?
Okay, well, if you want to, you mean all of them? I guess I could, I don't normally like to give out lists of pro-life legislators, because if I don't add one who thinks he's pro-life, but may not have been 100%. I don't want them to get angry with me. I want that vote. But I can tell you your pro-life legislator if you're not sure. So if you want to contact me at ralph@illinoisrighttolife.org, say, can you tell me if my two pro-life or my two legislators are pro-life? I prefer us to work that way than to give out a roll call sheet on who's pro-life and who's not.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Easy question. When will the assembly go back into session again?
So this week, nothing. Next week, the Senate was only to be in. They've now canceled because they don't have any work to do. They don't have any bills to deal with. So the next time, and the next time the House is in will be February 2nd through the 4th. And the next time the Senate will be in will be February 9th through the 11th, along with the House. So things are starting slowly, but that's when they will be in.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ralph. Next question. Somebody wants to know, what do they say to legislators when they call them? One of the things that we're going to be happy to do is give you tips on what to say, details about the legislation. As soon as we actually have the bills, we'll be able to give you specifics about what's in them, what's good, what's bad. But it's the thing that is really just flabbergasts me is how gung-ho abortion advocates are in the state to repeal parental notification. This is a measure that a majority of people, even people who consider themselves pro-choice, support. I mean, parents want to be involved in their children's lives, and most parents love their children and want the best for them. So knowing that this might not be popular, Ralph, are there other things that the legislature might do to try and get rid of parental notification?
I think they're going to start with they're trying to see if they can get the full repeal. So that's what we're concentrating on. And they're going to judge that based on their roll call, just as Molly and I will be doing a roll call and have done a roll call. So we've got a roll call even before the General Assembly, the new one started. We know based on new members, et cetera, but there's some leeway. There's still some unknowns that we want to check on. We'd love the opportunity again to sit down with them and talk to them about it. But nothing works better than you sitting down with your legislator and sharing your concern as a parent, as a constituent, and they appreciate that. Jeannie, how do you feel? What has always been most important when people came to see you or didn't? How do you feel?
No, they need to basically just be normal, just walk up and say hello. Hey, not adversarial, just say, look, this is my concern. This is why I care so much about this topic. If you have a personal story, that's great. If you can always tie it to, I don't know, if you want to influence someone parental notice, I think the really thing is like, look, you could say I'm part of a group that cares about sex trafficking victims. And I know that abortion without parental signature is an easy way for people to get around that. I mean, I think if you come with there with like a concern that almost nobody can refute, like nobody wants kids sex trafficked, right? That's why I think this thing should be DOA. But personal stories really are the best way to do it, and just, non-confrontational, just want to have a conversation with you.
Okay, thanks, Jeannie. And actually, I have another question for you as a former legislator. Just from your experience being in the lion's den, how would you answer this question? Do elected officials, even pro-abortion ones, understand that they're there to represent everybody, even their pro-life constituents? And why don't they? What's driving them?
Well, I always felt as a legislator that, you know what, I'm better off telling you who I am, what I stand for, and how I'm going to make decisions on legislation, so that when I go down there, you know how I'm going to represent you. That way I can vote the way I'm going to vote. And so if anybody elected me, and there were plenty of people that are pro-aborts, but they care about taxes and schools and other things more, they voted for me. They just are. They are there. But they knew that I was going to vote pro-life, and they weren't radical pro-aborts either, by the way. They weren't radical. They maybe had rape and incest or, first trimester type of thing, right? So the Democrats have gone way off the deep end, especially on this issue. And I think that's really important to put out. They've gone way out of the norm of what anybody thinks is rational thought. And when you look at national polling, most people don't agree with taxpayer funding of abortion. Most people don't agree with late-term abortion. So we are in a good position to make those arguments. So I think they know that the reason though that they're not really representing your ideas is because they think there's not enough of people who think the way you think to take them out of office. And they think they're so well funded by Madigan's machine or Personal PAC or other people that that they can hold those views and still sit in office. And that's why they keep getting elected, because there's enough people that maybe their big thing is like, I'm a teacher, it's all about the teacher unions, my pension, that's it. And it's the only thing I'm going to vote on. So they're single issue voters on other things, and they know their constituents better than you do, than you know your neighbors. And so that's what happens.
So thanks so much, Jeannie. I actually have a question for you, Steve. This doesn't necessarily tie in with legislation, but if you could briefly address, there's been a ton of chat tonight about the COVID-19 vaccines and, whether they contain the cells of aborted babies, et cetera. Could you please address those concerns quickly?
Yes, and there is actually a blog post out on our website that addresses this, that builds in some of Charlotte Lozer's Institute's research into this. But I think what really helps is to have an understanding of the primary role that abortion-derived fetal cell lines typically play in vaccines. So essentially, decades ago, there were cells that were extracted from an abortively killed preborn human, and they were extracted from different organs. So there's this one cell line called the HEK 293 cell line. So the best way of thinking about it is that there was this cell line, and scientists were able to replicate it and use it in vaccines. So it's not an issue of whether or not a child that was abortively killed in 2020, that those cells might be in the vaccine, but rather that the descendant cells from these cells from decades ago, that those could be used either in the creation or the production or the testing of the vaccines.
So thanks so much, Steve. And as some of you might have noticed, Sarah, our fabulous producer, posted a link to a blog post that Steve and I wrote last month about this issue. And also, as Steve just mentioned, the Charlotte Lozier Institute has wonderful information on their website about how these vaccines were research created, et cetera. So I would encourage you to both read the blog and visit the Charlotte Lozier Institute website. So as we are running out of time tonight, I just want to, first of all, thank our panel. Thank you everyone for being here. And a very, very special thank you to all of you who are here tonight to listen to this conversation. Being informed, and as I've said a million times now, being engaged is what is going to turn the tide in Illinois. And the reason that I'm here, even though a lot of people thought I was crazy for coming to Illinois, the reason I'm here is because I firmly believe that with great challenge comes great opportunity. And we have got tremendous opportunity here in Illinois. And I just encourage all of you to remain engaged. Stay tuned to what Illinois Right to Life Action and Illinois Right to Life are doing. We are in the process of creating a 5-year strategic plan to take back Illinois. And the most important component of that plan is every single one of you watching tonight. I encourage all of you to share with 5 people what you heard tonight. Encourage 5 people to sign up for our emails. Encourage 5 people to follow us on social media. By people being informed, and especially by us working together and having a unified front, we are going to turn the tide here in Illinois. Don't give up hope. The pro-life movement is one of love and hope. And where there's life, there is always hope. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jeannie, Molly, Ralph, and Sarah behind the scenes. And I look forward to meeting all of you in 2021. And trust me, this is going to be a great year. Thanks, everyone.